Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are going to be talking about altcoins. You know, those cryptocurrencies that aren't Bitcoin.
Right, all those other digital assets that are out there.
Exactly. And, we've got some really interesting source material for this deep dive. It's from a recent discussion with some crypto experts, and let me tell you, there are some seriously bold predictions in here.
Oh yeah, it seems like everyone's trying to figure out what's going to happen with altcoins, especially with all the changes happening in the political landscape.
Yeah, it's like a whole new ballgame, especially with the new administration coming in.
And they're not shying away from making predictions either. One of the things that really jumped out at me was this claim that altcoins are about to explode.
Whoa, hold on, explode. Like how explode?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out, right?
Yeah.
The source seems to think that a lot of this potential boom is tied to the incoming Trump administration and how they might shake things up in terms of crypto policy.
Interesting. So are they saying Trump is going to be good for crypto?
Well, they seem to think it's going to be a more pro-crypto environment than we've seen before. They even suggest that we might see someone like Charles Hoskinson, the founder of Cardano, advising the Trump administration on crypto policy.
Whoa, hold up. Cardano advising Trump. That's wild.
I know, right? And they actually have clips of Hoskinson talking about how he's been spending a lot of time in D.C. working with lawmakers to try to create a clearer regulatory framework for crypto.
That's actually really important because right now things are kind of a mess. You know, like trying to figure out if crypto is a security or a commodity is a nightmare.
Yeah, it's a total gray area, and that uncertainty scares a lot of investors away.
Totally. If we could get some clear guidelines, I think that would be a game changer.
Oh, absolutely. It would boost investor confidence, and we could even see more institutional players entering the market.
Which brings us to our next point, because the source also talks about the possibility of a bipartisan bill focused on crypto regulation.
Can you imagine both sides of the aisle actually agreeing on something in the crypto space? That would send a massive signal to the market.
It would be huge. And it sounds like Hoskinson is serious about making this happen. He's even setting up a policy office at his company to start working with policymakers in January.
That's impressive. He's putting his money where his mouth is. And speaking of money, let's talk about Wall Street because they're definitely not ignoring crypto anymore.
Oh, yeah. They're starting to see the potential, aren't they? The source even compares the current excitement around Ethereum to the buzz surrounding Amazon back in the 90s.
Like we're on the verge of something massive. And it's not just hype either. They point to BlackRock's spot Ethereum ETF. It just pulled in like $60.3 million in a single day. That's the biggest inflow they've seen in like 3 months.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So even the big institutions are starting to bet on Ethereum.
It seems like it, and it makes sense when you think about it. Remember Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock? He's been talking about the value of Ethereum, especially when it comes to tokenization.
Oh, yeah, tokenization that's like representing real-world assets on a blockchain, right?
Exactly. It's like turning something like a piece of real estate or a work of art into a digital token that can be traded on a blockchain.
So you could own like a fraction of a Picasso.
Exactly. Or shares in a building, all with the security and transparency of blockchain technology. It's huge.
Mind-blowing. And Ethereum, with its smart contracts, is seen as a leader in making tokenization a reality.
And it's not just BlackRock. The CEO of Vanek, another investment giant, called Ethereum a contrarian play and predicted it could hit $10,000 this cycle.
10,000. Wow. Especially if Bitcoin keeps doing what he even thinks Bitcoin could hit $300,000.
That's almost half the value of all the gold in the world.
I mean, these are just predictions, of course.
Of course.
And crypto is known for its, its ups and downs.
For sure. But when people like that start making predictions like that, people listen.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting how all of this ties back into the potential for clearer crypto regulations.
If businesses and investors feel more confident about the rules, they're more likely to jump in. And that could lead to a surge in investment and innovation, particularly in the altcoin space.
Right. It's like the Wild West out there right now. So a little bit of law and order could really help things along.
Exactly. And you know what else is interesting?
What's that?
The fact that Florida is going all in on Bitcoin. They're talking about creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
No way. A whole state is getting in on the Bitcoin action. That's crazy.
You know, right? And it actually aligns with what our source was saying about the potential for a national Bitcoin stockpile under the Trump administration.
So Florida's like a testing ground.
Maybe. The Florida Chief Investment Officer, The person who manages the state's investments actually sees Bitcoin as a hedge against economic instability and government overreach.
Wow, so they're not just doing it for the potential profits.
Yeah.
They're looking at it as a way to protect their assets.
Exactly. And they've already invested something like $800 million in crypto-related assets.
That's serious money. And they're thinking of increasing that amount under the new administration.
That's what they're saying.
It makes you wonder what would happen if other states and maybe even the federal government started doing the same thing.
Right. What kind of impact would that have on the price of Bitcoin and the overall adoption of crypto?
Huge questions.
Hmm.
And it really shows how crypto is becoming more and more intertwined with government policy and mainstream finance.
Absolutely. What started as this fringe technology is now being considered by major institutions and even state governments.
It's pretty amazing to see how far it's come.
It really is. So what do you think is the overall sentiment our source is expressing about the altcoin market? What's the main takeaway here?
I'd say it's definitely bullish, especially when it comes to altcoins like Ethereum and Cardano,
Yeah, there's a lot of optimism about the potential for growth.
especially with this potential pro-crypto political environment and the growing institutional interest.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of momentum building.
It does, but it's important to remember that the source also acknowledges the risks.
Right, crypto is still relatively young and unpredictable.
Exactly. There's still a lot of uncertainty about regulations, and the market can be incredibly volatile.
So while there's potential for big rewards, there are also big risks.
Absolutely. Anyone thinking about investing in this space needs to do their research, understand the risks, and never invest more than they can afford to lose.
That's good advice for any investment, really.
It is. Now, one of the things that really got me thinking was this question of what happens when these large financial institutions like BlackRock enter the crypto space?
Right. Is it good for decentralization or could it actually hinder it?
Because, one of the core principles of crypto is breaking free from the control of these traditional financial institutions.
Right. So it's kind of ironic that they're now becoming some of the biggest players in the game.
It is.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how this dynamic plays out over time.
It's like this tug of war between the old guard of finance and this new disruptive technology.
And the question is who's going to win?
Or maybe it's not about winning or losing, but about finding a way for both sides to coexist.
That's a good point. Maybe there's a way for the traditional financial system to evolve and embrace the innovations of crypto while still maintaining some level of stability and regulation.
It would definitely be a more interesting world.
Now let's think about how regulatory clarity could specifically impact the growth and adoption of altcoins. What do you think?
Well, I think if businesses and investors had a clear understanding of the rules, they'd be much more likely to participate in the market. It would remove a lot of the uncertainty and fear that's holding people back.
It's like taking the training wheels off. Once people feel confident they know how to ride the bike, they're more likely to hop on and go for it.
Exactly. But of course, there's always the other side of the coin, right?
Right. Some people argue that too much regulation could stifle innovation and undermine the decentralized nature of crypto.
Yeah, finding that balance between protecting investors and fostering innovation is going to be crucial.
It's a tough job for regulators, that's for sure.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about the potential for an altcoin boom fueled by policy changes and institutional adoption.
And we've also touched on the potential risks and complexities that come with those developments.
Right, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Mhm.
There are real challenges that need to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Now let's circle back to Florida for a moment and really dig into their decision to endorse a Bitcoin reserve.
All right, let's do it.
What are your thoughts on that, especially considering they already have all these other crypto investments?
Well, I think it's a really significant development. It shows a growing acceptance of crypto at the state level, and it could encourage other states to follow suit.
And it aligns with what our source was saying about the potential for a national stockpile.
Exactly. If the U.S. actually established a national Bitcoin reserve, it would be a major endorsement of crypto as a legitimate asset class.
It would be huge. It would send a signal to the rest of the world that the U.S. is taking crypto seriously. Other countries might be more inclined to follow their lead.
It could really accelerate global adoption.
But of course, there are also potential downsides to consider, right?
Oh, for sure. Some critics argue that this kind of government involvement could undermine the decentralized nature of crypto.
Right. They worry that governments could use their holdings to influence the market or even censor transactions.
Which would defeat the whole purpose of Bitcoin in the first place.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, and it's important to have these discussions and weigh the potential benefits and risks carefully.
Absolutely. The future of crypto is going to be shaped by a complex interplay of technological innovation, government policy, and market forces. It's a fascinating puzzle to try to solve.
And there's no easy answer.
Nope. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be an interesting ride.
So we've reached the end of part one of our deep dives. We've explored the potential policy shifts, the Wall Street frenzy, and even a state jumping into the Bitcoin pool.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But there's still so much more to explore. When we come back, we'll delve into the potential impact of widespread altcoin adoption on global finance and individual investors. Stay tuned, because this is where things get really interesting.
Welcome back to our deep dive, folks. We're picking up right where we left off, talking about Florida and their big Bitcoin play.
Yeah, it's wild to think about, isn't it? A whole state jumping headfirst into Bitcoin.
It really makes you think about how far crypto has come, from this fringe idea to something that governments are seriously considering.
It's like Bitcoin has gone from being the rebel to part of the establishment.
It's a bit ironic, isn't it? Considering its whole origin story was about being this decentralized alternative to traditional finance.
Yeah, it was supposed to be this escape from government control, and now governments are like, hey, maybe we should get in on this.
It's a fascinating twist in the narrative, and it makes you wonder how that original vision of Bitcoin is going to evolve as more institutions get involved.
Right, like can Bitcoin truly stay decentralized if governments start holding massive amounts of it?
That's the million-dollar question, or should I say the Bitcoin question?
Huh. Good one. But it's interesting that the Florida CIO specifically talked about Bitcoin as a hedge against economic turmoil and government overreach.
Right, that idea of protecting your wealth from inflation or irresponsible government policies is a powerful narrative.
And it resonates with a lot of people, especially those who are already skeptical of the traditional financial system.
Exactly. They see Bitcoin as a way to opt out of a system. They don't trust a way to safeguard their financial freedom.
It's a whole new way of thinking about money and value, and it's challenging the status quo in a really big way.
It definitely is. So we've got this tension playing out between the desire for decentralization and the potential for governments to become major players in the crypto space. It's a story that's still unfolding.
Absolutely. But let's shift gears a bit and bring it back to those altcoins specifically. Ethereum. Remember that comparison our source made to Amazon in the 90s?
Oh, yeah, like we're on the cusp of something huge.
Exactly. And all those institutional investors pouring money into BlackRock's Ethereum ETF, that's got to be a sign of something right.
It's a pretty strong signal that Wall Street is starting to take Ethereum seriously. They see the potential not just for price appreciation, but for real innovation and disruption.
Especially with tokenization. It's like a whole new world of possibilities opens up.
It does. We talk about this idea of democratizing finance, but tokenization could actually make it happen.
Right. Instead of just a few big players controlling everything, you could have people from all walks of life investing in things like real estate, art, or even fractional ownership of businesses.
It would level the playing field in a way that we've never seen before. And Ethereum, with its smart contracts, is well positioned to be the platform that makes this all possible.
It's pretty exciting stuff.
It is. And remember what that Vanek CEO said. He thinks Ethereum could hit $10,000 this cycle.
I know it sounds crazy, but when you look at the potential of tokenization and the growing institutional interest, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility.
Exactly. But of course, we always have to remember that crypto is a risky investment.
Absolutely. It's volatile. Things can change quickly, and there's always the potential for scams and hacks.
Right. It's not for the faint of heart. Anyone thinking about investing in altcoins needs to do their homework, understand the technology, and be prepared for a bumpy ride.
It's like any other investment, really. You got to do your research, diversify, and never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Exactly. So yes, there's a lot of potential upside, but there are also real risks to consider.
Right. It's important to keep both sides of the equation in mind. So with that said, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture. What happens if altcoins really do go mainstream? What kind of impact could that have on the global financial system?
Ooh, now we're getting into the really interesting stuff. This is where we start to see the potential for some truly transformative change. We're talking about a shift in power, a challenge to the existing financial order.
It's almost like a financial revolution brewing.
In a way it is. I mean, imagine a world where decentralized currencies like Bitcoin become the norm.
Where people are using them for everyday transactions.
Right. That would completely upend the power dynamic between governments and individuals.
Suddenly, central banks wouldn't have the same level of control over the money supply or interest rates.
Exactly. It would be a fundamental shift in how we think about money and value. And then you've got the impact on cross-border
Oh
transactions.
yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Right now, sending money internationally can be a real pain. It's slow, it's expensive, and it often involves a ton of paperwork.
Right. But with altcoins, it could all become much more streamlined and efficient.
Like imagine sending money to a friend or family member in another country instantly
Yeah.
and for a fraction of the cost.
Exactly. It would open up a whole new world of possibilities for individuals and businesses. And then there's the potential for greater financial inclusion.
Oh, right. Millions of people around the world don't have access to basic financial services like bank accounts or loans.
Exactly. But with altcoins, you don't need a bank. You just need a smartphone or an internet connection.
So people who have been excluded from the traditional financial system could finally have access to the tools they need to build a better life.
It's really powerful stuff. But of course, with all this potential comes a whole set of challenges.
Right. It's not going to be easy to completely revolutionize the global financial system.
For one thing, there's the issue of scalability.
Right. Can these blockchain networks handle the massive volume of transactions that would be required if everyone started using altcoins?
That's a big question mark. And then there's the volatility issue.
Yeah, using a currency that fluctuates wildly in value could be a real headache. Imagine trying to budget for your monthly expenses if you're not sure what your money will be worth tomorrow.
It would be a nightmare. And then, of course, there's security.
People need to feel confident that their money is safe and secure if they're going to use altcoins for everyday transactions.
So there's a lot of work to be done on the technology front before altcoins can truly go mainstream. But the potential is there.
Absolutely. So let's bring it back to our source for a minute. What was their overall assessment of the altcoin market?
They're definitely bullish. They see a lot of potential for growth driven by those policy changes, the institutional investments, and the increasing awareness among individual investors.
Right. They're painting a picture of a potential altcoin boom.
But they also acknowledge the risks and uncertainties that come with any emerging technology.
Right. They emphasize the importance of doing your research, understanding the risks, and having a long-term perspective.
They're basically saying don't get caught up in the hype, make informed decisions, and be prepared for the long haul.
Wise words. Now, before we move on, let's address one last point, that our source raised the concern that these good institutions like BlackRock could end up centralizing control over crypto.
Yeah, that's a real concern, isn't it? Like, we invite these big players in because we want their money and their expertise, but then they end up dominating the space.
And the whole idea of decentralization goes out the window?
Exactly. So it's a delicate balance. It's like trying to harness the power of these institutions without letting them take over.
So the question is, can crypto maintain its rebellious spirit as it becomes more mainstream?
Can it stay true to its roots, even as it's being embraced by the very institutions it was designed to challenge?
That's a question that will only be answered over time,
Mm.
but it's definitely something to keep in mind as we watch this space evolve.
Absolutely. So we've explored the potential of altcoins, the opportunities and risks they present, and the broader implications for the global financial system.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to uncover. So when we come back, we'll wrap up our discussion with some final thoughts and a question that we hope will spark some further exploration on your end.
Stay tuned, folks. And we're back for the final leg of our altcoin journey. So much to think about, right?
It is a lot to process, that's for sure.
We've talked about a potential altcoin boom. Wall Street's getting in on the action. Governments are eyeing Bitcoin like it's the next gold rush.
Yeah, it's a wild world out there right now, and it's changing so fast.
So before we wrap things up, let's try to distill some key takeaways from all of this and maybe leave our listeners with a little something to chew on.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so takeaway number one. It really feels like the stars are aligning for crypto, at least in terms of the political landscape.
Yeah, that potential for a pro-crypto environment under the new administration, that's huge.
Right, and the possibility of some clear regulations that would make investors feel more comfortable that could really open the floodgates.
And then you've got Wall Street jumping into the game with both feet.
I mean, those BlackRock ETF inflows, those were massive. It's not just speculation anymore. These institutions are seeing real value in Ethereum.
And it's not just the price potential either. It's the technology, the innovation, the possibilities that Ethereum opens up, especially with tokenization.
Right, tokenization, that's the real game changer. It could revolutionize so many industries.
Imagine a world where you can own a fraction of a Picasso or a piece of real estate, all with the click of a button.
It's like the internet of value, like we were saying before.
Exactly. It could make investing more accessible, more transparent, more efficient.
It's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
But of course, we got to be realistic too, right?
Of course, crypto is still a young market, and it's incredibly volatile.
Right, and there are risks involved, like with any investment.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to do your research, understand the technology, be aware of the risks, and never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Words to live by. It's like exploring a new frontier. There's incredible potential, but you got to be prepared for the unknown.
You need a good map, a compass, and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So here's a question for you and for all of our listeners out there. Just imagine for a moment that all of those bullish predictions we've been talking about actually come true.
All right, I'm imagining.
Altcoins go mainstream, tokenization takes off, crypto becomes this integral part of the global financial system. What does that world look like?
That's a good question.
It is. Is it a world with more financial inclusion where everyone has access to the tools and opportunities they need to thrive?
Or does it become just another system where the rich get richer and the same power structures remain in place?
Right, because even though crypto was born out of this desire for decentralization and disruption, there's no guarantee that it will stay that way.
It's like anything else. Once it reaches a certain level of success, the establishment tries to co-opt it.
Exactly. So the question becomes, can crypto resist that pressure? Can it stay true to its roots?
Only time will tell, but it's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here.
Right? Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep challenging the status quo.
The future of finance is being written right now, and your participation matters.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the wild world of altcoins.
We'll see you next time.